This video will talk about our last form of learning called observational learning. Observational learning is also called social learning theory. It involves learning by looking at others. The others here tend to be those in higher status, like parents or teachers. And learning will occur in 4 parts or stages. The first one is attention. This is simply the fact that the observer must be focused on the task being learned, like focus on learning numbers here. And retention is that observer must be able to retain the learned information in memory, like those students here are able to retain learned numbers. And the third one is initiation. The observer must be able to perform the task being learned, and this requires access and ability. And finally, motivation. The observer must want to perform the learned task, and these 4 stages is what describes how learning occurs by observation. The Bobo doll experiment was conducted to explore observational learning. In this video, you will see an experiment. A parent interacts with a Bobo doll in front of a child observer. In some cases, the parent behaves aggressively toward the Bobo doll, like punching and kicking. The results show that children exposed to the aggressive social model were more likely to mimic the abusive behavior toward the doll, and to an even greater extent when observing the person with the same sex. However, researchers found that the observed behavior can be changed when observing or watching other people's consequences, like reinforcement or punishment. This is called vicarious reinforcement. So children in the aggression group showed less aggressive behavior when they see adults being punished. Observational learning doesn't just occur in humans. There's also evidence in other non-human animals like chimpanzees, and also invertebrates like octopus. So when an octopus observed or watched other octopus perform a selection task, they found that they made the same choice later on. Based on the advance of neuroimaging techniques, they found that when observation learning occurs, mirror neurons in the subregions of the frontal and parietal lobes will show activity. You might wonder, why do learning sometimes not occur? The concept is called reduced or deficit learning and is tied to learned helplessness. This is when humans or animals have learned to behave helplessly, even though there are opportunities to gain positive rewards like positive reinforcement, or avoid unpleasant circumstances, or removing negative punishment. Lack of sense of control over stressful or threatening events may be the contributing reasons why people or animals may develop learned helplessness. This is an experiment by Seligman and Meyer with dogs. At the beginning, dogs receive shocks from which they can't escape, but later on, even though they were given the opportunity to run away, most dogs didn't even bother trying. Negative life events could be one reason why people develop learned helplessness. They may disbelieve that they are powerless to change the situation. Some of the effects of learned helplessness include reduced learning or reduced motivation to learn, decreased effort and persistence in managing future similar life events, or increased negative affect or emotions like anger and depression, and lower self-efficacy, which is the belief to do well. Have learned helplessness happened to you? Differences in attribution style can tell how people explain the cause of events. For example, pessimistic attribution style view negative events as permanent, like the situation will never change. Personal, it's my fault, and pervasive, I can't do anything correctly. In contrast, optimistic individuals tend to have greater perceived control under negative events and use more coping strategies to combat stress. Lastly, we will briefly talk about learning and psychopaths. So psychopaths are those with antisocial behavior, and they may have learning impairments and emotions. Research has found that they lack empathy and have dysfunctions in the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, which controls for the emotion of fear. And they are less sensitive to reinforcers and punishments. And finally, they have difficulty in directing attention to emotions. So these different reasons may explain their antisocial behavior.